Scientology could be called, well, you could call it a religion of religions.
Howdy everybody, and welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast with your host Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy. These are closed-door secret briefings about vital information about Scientology and the world that you need to know. And I'm sitting here at a different desk. I sort of changed things around, and it's been a while since I've done a briefing, but I'm back doing it. A lot of stuff has gone on in my life and in the world since my last briefing. Now this briefing is part 2 of my OT8 briefing, and the part 1, which I only posted a few weeks ago, I actually recorded that at the start of COVID, like around March last year. And I didn't get around to posting it because my YouTube channel was deleted and all this stuff. And because it was such a controversial thing, because it's OT8 or whatever, I just waited till, to post it. But I was actually on a roll early 2020. I did a bunch of great briefings one after another. And I hadn't got around to posting the OT8 one. So with this part 2 briefing about OT8, you should probably go and watch part 1 and not just start in it part 2. But I'll say a confidential data warning. This is me talking about OT8 after me looking into it. And so if a Scientologist listening to this doesn't want to hear data that they're not ready for, then don't listen to this part 1 or this part 2 or the other part 1. And there might be a part 3 coming. In this part 2, I might actually read out some of OT8, but it's not any of the auditing commands. It's just the student briefing document, which is like an introduction to OT8 that LRH wrote at the start. At the start of OT8 for students to read. And what's good about this student briefing is that it actually is written around 1980, and it was when LRH had sort of started to really actually sort of disconnect from the church and Scientology and started getting back into his fiction writing, and was in hiding for the last few years of his life. And it's actually like a little goodbye message, actually. Like I can't think of anything that LRH has written or said that is more suited to his final parting words to Scientologists on Earth. And the way it's written, it says he's expecting to die, so he's expecting not to live that much longer, and it really is his final words. But it also has the cool OT8 data in it. So it's a great thing, and I might read it out if I've got time. But I just want to say the seriousness of data that people aren't ready for. I'm totally cool with reading things that are more advanced. But there is someone that I'm aware of who I think committed suicide, right? Well, he committed suicide, but I think partially he did it because he came across, not this OT8 data, he came across some other data in Scientology that was so life-changing for him and so deep that he killed himself, right? And I'm sure there were other reasons for him killing himself, but it helped tip him over the edge. Because what happened was that it actually was a South Africa lecture, which I've done a whole briefing on, and that briefing, I mentioned how serious the data is and stuff, and that you go and listen, if you haven't listened to that briefing, by the way, because in the briefing I play some of the South African lecture. It might have been taken down, hopefully not, but it's L. Ron Hubbard just says the truth about the different racial body types here on Earth, and he says how he's actually for the right-wing, the hardcore, borderline Nazi right-wing government in South Africa in 1960, right? And he says how he just says stuff that would make a leftist vomit. I mean, I listened to him and was like, oh, this is brilliant, this is so intelligent, he's so right. And I spoke to an auditor in South Africa, and she was like, yeah, he's right about that. Because Hubbard in it says that the native blacks in South Africa don't even register on the e-meter. And so lefties would just have hernias at hearing this sort of stuff. They're like, So this guy who committed suicide was a lefty, you see. And so hearing, seeing my briefing or whatever and hearing this lecture, it totally was like, whoa. And he probably already had some problems and was probably already a little bit suicidal, but then hearing this was like, whoa, this is too much, and he killed himself. So sometimes some people who personally I think are really pathetic, they cannot handle information and it can make them kill themselves. Seriously. So the information I'm going to talk to you about in this briefing, you might be one of these degenerate people, and you might not be able to handle it, and you might even kill yourself, okay? Like, it's a really, really low chance that would happen. I highly doubt that, but I just better put that in there, because when I sent this South African lecture to this guy, I sent it to a bunch of Scientologists because I'd never come across this lecture, and the church deleted it, and I was like, this is fascinating data, and this is like, whoa, L. Ron Hubbard's saying how the body's important, and how the body that you like, because Scientologists have this idea that it's all about the Satan and it's nothing about the body. And in this lecture, it's like, no, Hubbard was like, no, the body you have. He's basically saying the body you have determines your intelligence and all this sort of stuff, because he's saying how the white race brought civilization to South Africa and all this stuff. So I sent this guy. I sent a bunch of people this lecture, and then I found out he killed himself, and only months later did I look at it, and I looked at when I had sent him this lecture, and it was like 12 hours before he killed himself, and I was like, whoa, that timing is too perfect. Like, I really could have tipped him over the edge with that message. So I accidentally caused someone to kill themselves, so that's pretty crazy. But yeah, I mean, that's just wild. So I'm just going to say some people just cannot handle data. I mean, and that's why, anyway, whoa. He I don't know if, yeah, anyway, he was a bit of a lefty. So some people, lefties, are just like that. They just cannot handle facts. And that's why they go and attack things on YouTube, and they love censorship, and they love encouraging the government and Facebook to censor people, because they go along in life like putting up blinkers, and they don't like hearing unpleasant things. Whereas I'm the opposite, where I go, I'm happy to hear unpleasant things as long as it's the truth, because I'm just interested in the truth. And you eventually harden up and become a responsible adult, not a wuss, and you don't say, oh, Daddy, please take that post down, and oh, government, please censor that, I don't like the sound of that. And it's ridiculous. I once ordered a guy who was like of this lefty type, and he literally said to me, he just well, he didn't literally say to me, but he was like, oh, I just like happy things and flowers, and like he didn't like hearing about anything bad like conspiracies or anything, because it scared him. It was just like, oh. So some people are just like, what the hell? Anyways, because it's not extremely obvious that Hubbard's right wing. But if you'd studied Scientology for years and years and years and years, and you're a little bit suspicious it was right-wing, and then you heard this South African lecture, you'd be like, whoa! It'll just like shatter your whole illusion that you had for years. Anyway, going off topic, but I'm just saying that, yeah, you know, if you're a wuss, then don't listen to this video. Okay, but I stand for the truth, and that's why I'm making this, and that's why I want to read out this briefing, because it's data that you need to know, and I'm sick of data being hidden from us, from the governments and from Freemasons and the Illuminati. They keep all this information from us, and it really annoys me, so I don't want to be a part of that. And this OT8 data is already on the internet anyway. So But anyway, you're not going to have any idea how to audit it, so I'm not going to somehow key you in or make you accidentally start running this by listening to this briefing. You know, I'm not going to read anything about that out. Now, OT8 relates to God. There's auditing questions and stuff that relate to God, and well, it sort of deals in that subject and stuff. And from what I read of the OT8 questions, if you've done objectives, they seem fairly similar, or any type of auditing. It wasn't like when you look at the questions, you're like, whoa, they're just sort of questions like, I'll just read one out because it's just so straightforward. Like, it's not going to kill you or anything if you hear it. So I'll give you an example. Spot a person who you want to be. Handle as above, and that there must be some handling techniques. And then something like, spot a being who has the same experiences as you. And so this sort of relates to the 8th dynamic and stuff. And so there, I did it. I know I said I wasn't going to do it before, but I read out 2 of the auditing questions. So I just think it's so ridiculous that people are freaked out about hearing these things. This is the sort of stuff you could come across in an objectives course room, these sort of spot a reality you have solved with a lie. I mean, serious. I mean, it's just like, whoa. But they sort of relate to create a future for someone. See, that relates to being God sort of stuff. Those sort of questions, you know. But also what comes up is history of man. So if you just read history of man, there you go. Did that kill you from reading history of man? Because a lot of the implants on OT8 relate to history of man. Okay, so I just want to mention that. Now, the whole idea, I think one of the ideas you might come across, or one of the EPs of OT8 might have something to do with it, your God or something like that. That might come up as well. But carrying on from my previous briefing, at the end of it, I said I'm going to get into the racist part of OT8 and the whole. And I've learnt more since then. So it's actually not that racist, but it is discriminatory of certain body types, because certain body types seem to have been more affected by the implant. And what the implant is, and it's mentioned it, Hubbard mentions it in the student briefing. The implant is basically so that the body is genetically changed so that it's harder for the Satan to exteriorize. So the body's more of a trap, but also the body becomes affected by telepathic communications, right? From evil beings from another dimension, right? And that's the big truth revealed, right? That there are evil beings, and also that you are God, but that there are evil beings in a whole nother dimension that are influencing things here on Earth. And this is the sort of stuff that David Icke talks about, like interdimensional entities controlling the elite, and the elite enslaving us because they're affected by interdimensional entities. So David Icke literally backs up LRH. Alex Jones says the same thing. He says the elite are controlled by interdimensional entities, and you know, they are bringing about the New World Order. So you can be listening to Alex Jones, and he's only mentioned it once or twice or whatever, but he'll just full-blown say it. He'll say the truth revealed. He'll say what OT8 is. He'll say what, I guess, the big cognition or the big discovery by L. Ron Hubbard of what's going on here on Earth. Because people know about this sort of stuff, and it doesn't kill you to know it. You don't have to get to OT8 and be given a special gradient. You can just tell someone off the street, but people just won't believe it because it's out reality. And that's what this OT8 thing is. People just would just be like, what the hell, what are you talking about? They won't get it. But I'm going to try and explain it to you, because what it is that every being seems to have, maybe not everybody, because some bodies don't seem to be as spiritual as others. Some don't seem to have the ability to pick up on other dimensions and communications and other beings. But some people can pick up on all this sort of stuff. They've got all this psychic stuff going on. An example would be a guy called Peter Maxwell Slattery. He's like a UFO guy, but he's like a psychic medium or whatever. And he just has all this funky stuff happen in his life. Like all this, and he sees UFOs all the time. Like he's really spiritual. He's tapped into other dimensions. He's tapped into gods, other gods. Now, there are certain people here on Earth and certain bloodlines and families and stuff. This is where the whole sort of race thing comes in. It's not so much race, but Jews tend to have this more than other races. But it's just, you can be anyone. You don't have to be a Jew to get this evil interdimensional communication. It's just that they do have a higher percentage. You know what I mean? So that's where the previous briefing where I was saying, oh, my next briefing to be so racist, blah, blah, blah. I don't really think it's that racist, but lefties, maybe me just mentioning the word Jew, they'll have a whole hernia in me daring to say that there is a higher percentage of evil amongst that community compared to the average European. Okay? It's just a fact. I just want to say it. But these interdimensional, this force of evil, right, is interdimensional beings that are communicating with earthlings. You can be from any racial background to get it. And what Hubbard's is saying in OT8 is that more and more of the bodies here on Earth are getting this implant, and it's like contagious, and so more and more of the bodies here on Earth are becoming difficult to exteriorize from, and they are receiving a telepathic communication from the other dimension from the evil dudes. And he says something like 80 million years ago, these evil gods, you could call them, started trying to infiltrate the meshed universe or whatever. So what I've noticed is that the force of evil, I've noticed it does seem to exist, and it does seem to be like a hive mind, and it is like coordinated, and that this whole idea of communism and socialism that we see rapidly expanding across Earth, it does seem too well coordinated to just be a bunch of evil dudes wanting to enslave people. They're working together too well. It's like they're psychically connected, their minds. And that's because these bodies you see here on Earth, these evil bodies, I'm saying, from these bloodlines that have this implant that's strong, these bodies are receiving, their source of God is these evil gods. Do you see what I mean? My gods are the gods, I think, from the Galactic Confederation. And I think I've got the same gods as Hubbard's gods. And that whole idea is to bring enlightenment to Earth and to set people free, and it isn't about enslavement. But we all don't have the same gods. That's what I'm trying to say. So these evil people with these evil bloodlines, they're tapped into their gods. I'm tapped into my gods, right? They're tapped into their gods. Their gods are directing, right, and enslavement of Earth. And they're doing it through people who have this telepathic communication line. This is the idea that Hubbard's expressing in OT8. So that's where it's like it's coordinated. You got one evil dude in this location doing something, and then another evil dude in another location doing something, and it fits in well, and they work together well. And it's similar actually to what I think is the Galactic Confederation, and I think the force of good, the good gods that I'm tapped into. I mentioned that Peter Maxwell Slattery guy. I think there's another guy called James Gilliland who's a UFO guy. I as soon as I listened to him, I was like, I think like you, I agree with you, we got the same gods, you know. And so it's like we're coordinated. So the whole force of good, it's like we're connected, and one person does something and Alex Jones does something over there, and someone else who's good, David Icke, does something over here, and it all brings about this whole mass awakening on Earth. And it's like we're coordinated because we're tapping into the same gods. And it's like with these evil dudes who are pushing the New World Order and communism and socialism, and pushing COVID and all this stuff, they've got their gods and they're directing these evil dudes around Earth to do this, right? And so that's what this OT8 is saying by Hubbard. He's saying that, look, there's these beings that are somewhere else that are communicating with people here on Earth, right, in these bodies that are implant affected. They're affected by this implant, right? The implant has made their body a trap, has made them have telepathic connection to these beings and receive comms from them. And it's getting them to, like, enslave Earth, right? And on this OT8 that I've just come up with, you can audit it. You can audit it, and you can run out this implant so that then your body is cool and you're not affected by these, I guess, the telepathic communications and stuff. And then you pass that on in your genetics to your children. So we actually introduces a whole new idea, which is interesting in this, in that implants can actually affect your genetics. Because he hasn't really mentioned that before. He hasn't mentioned it, like, let's think of Dianetics and engrams and stuff. You know, you get your head bashed against a wall or something like that and you have a really big engram. There's no mention of the engram possibly being passed on to your children in your genetics. That's not really a thing. But on this OT8 thing, this implant, Hubbard's had his new discovery that an implant can affect the genetics. And that's what he's saying. And so he's saying, get in there quickly, get as many people to OT8 as possible, and let's audit this out so that then Earth can be saved, basically. Now, I just remembered something that was interesting. Anyway, so that's basically the idea. Now, it seems that some part of OT8 involves remote influencing, right? Now, if you don't know what remote influencing is, maybe you know what remote viewing is. But remote viewing is basically taking your awareness from the here and now to some other time. So you tap into 100 years in the future, or you tap into 100 years in the past, and it's a special psychic ability. Scientology actually helped invent it, basically. People in the CIA and stuff and in the government actually invented it, and it's so cool. But it started with Scientology because Hubbard was obsessed with exteriorization, and he never quite worked it out. But the people in the government worked out the remote viewing because they took what Hubbard was doing and they improved it and fixed it up, and you could say they completed his work. Because they worked out a way that you can take someone off the street, train them intensely in this, and you can actually get them to exteriorize and go visit other places and then come back. And it's just incredibly amazing. But it's actually real, and it can be used as an intelligence gathering source. Because why would you need a James Bond if you can just send someone to go exteriorize and go and look at a special facility or something like that? It's totally real. Don't believe anyone who doesn't think remote viewing is real. Remote viewing is actually real. It's mind-blowing. And that's why you can never appreciate Scientology, I think, until you look into remote viewing and realize it's actually real, and realize, oh my God, this is what Hubbard was getting people to do. He was getting you to move on the track. It's just the same as remote viewing. Anyway, but what can happen is you can remote influence. So while you're remote viewing, you can also, somehow using your thoughts, you can influence that space and time that you're visiting. And it's called remote influencing. It's just taking it to a whole new level. And that's also possible, right? It's like, whoa. Some people who are good at remote viewing and can sort of do this remote influencing thing can go and view 100 years ago or something, and if they're viewing a person who has an ability to has like a psychic ability, they can actually communicate to them 100 years ago. So that's really interesting, because they can go on remote view and have a conversation with someone 100 years ago, and it's like, whoa, and it's just unbelievable. Skeptics will not believe it, but it's actually possible, okay? It tends to happen with aliens a lot, because aliens probably aren't as affected by the implant, but whenever they remote view things, they time and time again, intentionally as well, they try and look into stuff to do with aliens. But time and time again, they come across aliens, and time again, the aliens are aware that they're being remote viewed, that there's another being there, exteriorized, watching them. And they have conversations and stuff. They literally communicate. But it seems to be with humans, when they go and do this, the humans don't even notice that there's another being there exteriorized. So somehow the aliens have this extra ability to sense and perceive more things in their environment. So they don't tend to have conversations with humans, Earth humans, but they do have it with alien humans and aliens, and it's just amazing. So on OT8, apparently what you do is you go back in time, you go on the track to when these beings first entered the mess universe, these evil beings, and you remote influence them and cut their influence or something like that, so that they can't, take over our universe or something like that. I think that's possibly what's part of OT8 as well. A good source on OT8 is George Witek, and he did some interviews with Ron Miscavige. But yeah, it's fascinating stuff. So yeah, it's basically, OT8 is basically really trying to address the slavery that's occurring here on Earth. And does it work? Well, I don't know. I don't know if there's much evidence for it working and that, but it's a cool idea, okay? Like a lot of Hubbard stuff, it's a cool idea, but it's like I don't fully believe in Clear. I don't fully believe in the EP of OT8. Like, I would like to see if somebody after doing OT8 can exteriorize and have children that can exteriorize easily. I kind of doubt that. But at least he's trying, and it's entertaining, and that's why, yeah, I don't fully buy much of this. But some people get really freaked out when they come across this OT8, because in this OT8 briefing, Hubbard mentions that he thought the Purif would solve the problem. He thought Dianetics would solve the problem. He thought OT3 would solve the problem of this exteriorization thing, and it didn't. And so he admits to you that he sells you on things, telling you that this will solve the problem, but it doesn't. So part of the truth revealed is also that you find out that Hubbard's just full of shit, and he over talks things, and he gets over keen on something, and it doesn't solve the problem. So some people get really freaked out by that, because they actually thought Hubbard was really trustworthy and really honest, and then they find out, oh, I'm following this wacky dude that like tells me that this can be achieved from this and it's wrong. And that some people go along in Scientology from the start and they can get all the way to the top, and they've actually bought it all, and they haven't realized that it's kind of dodgy and there's bullshit lies in it and stuff. So they really get thrown off by that. So some people actually, when they received this original version of OT8 on the ship in 1988 when it first got released, some people after that like killed themselves or got sick and had accidents because they were so freaked out by it. But from what I know about Hubbard and looking into his life and his history, when I read this, it doesn't shock me at all, because I was like, yeah, I know. You thought that you just talked all your stuff up, like you could do this and you do that and do grade 0 and you can communicate with anyone about anything, and like he just totally talked up everything. And but it's good because he's quite frank in this final message from him. From Hubbard, he's quite frank in it, and it's good. It's just because he's just quite honest. But again, he makes promises in this that I assume he probably won't fulfill. But you never know. Miracles are always possible, especially when it comes to psychic stuff. So, thoughts can create reality. It's really hard to do it, but sometimes magical stuff can happen. Like you can have a shaver that has no battery power, and your thought can go and power it up, and it can be powered. And you could never do it again. It was just a once-off, a total fluke, but sometimes magical stuff can happen. So you could do student briefing, and some people magically really could handle the problem of easy exteriorization and this telepathic communication common line. They really could just cut it, Sometimes miracles happen, So, I'm trying to think if there's anything else to say. Basically, what we see here on Earth, we see like a communist takeover of Earth. We see like this socialist takeover of Earth, and they're coordinated and they're setting up a world government, which is a new world order. It's like sort of like a communist government. And so the aliens, the beings from another dimension, they're setting this all up. They're doing it, and they're doing it through humans. So it's like an intelligence operation. And this is actually how I first discovered this, because I discovered that there appeared to be an intelligence operation to bring about a mass awakening here on Earth. And then I thought, like from the Galactic Confederation or something, I was like, yeah, I could see this thing, and I was like, it seems like there's something going on. And then I was like, hold on a second. Well, what if there's just bad aliens or bad gods, and they're doing a little intelligence operation here on Earth themselves? And they're manipulating people like puppets, and they're trying to enslave Earth. And then I look for evidence for that, and then there is evidence for that. And that's what we see going on. So Earth is like a battleground between gods, and we're just chess pieces that are getting pushed around by the gods. And the gods you don't even see. They're in like another dimension, right? So that's kind of like, I guess, the truth revealed of what's going on here on Earth. And David Icke talks about it, stuff like this, interdimensional stuff, entity stuff. So another way of thinking about it is the Lord of the Rings movies. I would really recommend watching them because you can get an idea of what Hubbard was talking about, of this interdimensional force. Because in Lord of the Rings you got Sauron, this like force of evil, and the force of evil is trying to get into Middle Earth, but he's not physical yet. He's from some other dimension or something, but he's manipulating those guys on the dark horses, and he's manipulating all that, and they're building those ugly, whatever they're called, dudes with the big hammers and stuff, and they're building an army. And there's that white wizard guy, the evil white wizard, and he's manipulated by the Sauron, and they're going out trying to take over and enslave Middle Earth. And that's very similar to the analogy of like this sort of communist New World Order taking over Earth. And you don't see Sauron, you don't see the force of evil, you don't see the beings, you don't see the bad gods, but you just see Biden. And you just see, well, actually, to be honest, I think he might just be a dropkick that's being manipulated by someone else. But you just see possibly people like Bill Gates, and you just see Prince Charles or something. But they're actually being manipulated, and they're putting this all together. So Lord of the Rings is a really good analogy. And the guy who wrote Lord of the Rings was a, I don't know, like a Harvard historian or something like that, but he knew his stuff. And he based, because there was hobbits in our past, there were short like dudes in our past and possibly were hairy. And there was tales of like godlike elves or whatever, or angelic beings and stuff. Like Lord of the Rings is like, it's not completely made up. And so this idea, like I know that for sure, okay, because there's stuff in our history, and he studied man's history. But his idea that he put into that Lord of the Rings story about the Sauron, I just bet you that he put that in there because it was quite possibly he noticed it in real life. And I bet you he was a Freemason. And Freemasons are aware of this sort of stuff, just like top Scientologists should be aware of this sort of stuff. That there is interdimensional forces doing intelligence operations here. And the reason I call it intelligence operations is because intelligence is a secret operation. That's what intelligence op is. 9/11 was a secret op. The CIA and other parts of the government coordinated 9/11. But you didn't see any of those people going around. But they made it happen. It's an intelligence op. It's a black op. So here on Earth, the good side, the Galactic Confederation I'm talking about, are doing a black op here, an intelligence op here to improve this place. I quite possibly could be an interdimensional intelligence agent, honestly, right? Come here to Earth to do a mission to help bring about enlightenment. Same as someone like Alex Jones, same as someone like David Icke. It's quite possible that's the case. They reincarnated here, chose this time and space to be here, and they've had their memory wiped and they don't even remember it. But when their life finishes, they'll go back to wherever they're from and go, wow, remember their whole mission and how they chose to came here at this time and space to bring about this awakening. So if you can't spot intelligence operations by CIA, you're never going to be able to spot this. You're never going to be able to spot intelligence operations by aliens or alien gods. You understand? Because you need to have that ability to be able to spot, something seems not right, something's going on. Someone's doing something coordinated. Why is there rainbow flags everywhere? Why is everything so like, Why is this country on this side of the world doing this and that all on the other side doing the same thing? And why did it happen all at the same time? Coordinated. Someone's there pulling the strings, causing this, but you can't see them. There's like a puppet master, you know what I mean? It's an intelligence op. So Sauron is pulling the strings in Lord of the Rings and making that whole enslavement happen. And then they get together and fight him and they beat him. But a good analogy of this is Sauron. I think it's called Sauron from Lord of the Rings, the force of evil or whatever. So Hubbard, that's what Hubbard's Truth Revealed is, I guess. He's saying this is what evil is, you know what I mean? So he also puts it in Hubbard's book Mission Earth. One of the evil characters in that book gets communications from the gods, and he tries to take over the I can't even remember the name, I haven't read it for ages, but he tries to take over the alien empire. And so you could say you put that idea into Mission Earth as well, that the evil people here on Earth, Rockefeller, and this evil person in the story that's not even from Earth, Lumbar Hiss, they're getting communications from another place, and it's driving them to enslave Earth. It's like on Lord of the Rings, where you got the Black Horse guys. They're driving. They want the greed and the power of the ring, and they're feeling it, and they want it, and they're tapped into it, and they're tapped into like Sauron's mind. They're in telepathic communication. And they're riding out on the horses, and they're trying to take over, and they're trying to get the hobbits. And you know, it's a similar thing where you got the Rockefeller and the Lumbar Hiss character in Mission Earth, and like Rockefeller goes, "Oh, do you hear that?" And you hear doo-doo-doo-doo, and he hears harps or something, and then he's like, "Oh, it's God communicating to me." And it's like Hubbard put that idea into his Mission Earth book. You know, it's not just fiction. That book's truth. It's just a fiction story, but it's truth. It's based on truth. So anyway, I know it's all complex and stuff. So that's the idea. And so the leftist, I think I like to call it the leftist hive mind, because these bankers who are enslaving us, these people like Rockefellers and the people at the heads of the banks in the world and stuff, possibly Bill Gates and stuff, they're infected by this implant, basically. So they really need to do their OT8. And they'll never stop acting they'll never stop desiring to enslave people until they get up to OT8. So even when you cleared them, and even when they're done OT3, and they'll become better and more competent, but sadly they'll become better and more competent at enslaving people. And only until they get up to OT8 will then finally their case will be handled. But that's the theory of it, right? So I'm trying to think what else I have to say. So yeah, like this is like the leftist hive mind, and if you look across Western society, you'll notice we really are getting taken over by lefties. We really are getting conquered by communism and socialism. It's really infecting and taking over, and more people are becoming evil and being infected by this hive mind, this evil mind. So I'm just trying to think if I should read this out, but I'll just recap in case you're not following. So basically, OT8 deals in the whole issue of God, and I think you find out you're God, and you become more of a God, and you realize you create everything. And also it deals in this whole Sauron force of evil, and it's a conspiracy theory that's an explanation for the evil that we see here on Earth. That's probably the most simple way to put it. It explains why 9/11 occurred. It explains why World War II occurred. It explains why this and that, and why COVID has occurred. Because it's being directed by evil gods from somewhere else who have a telepathic connection to certain people here on Earth. And those people here on Earth have a DNA that's corrupted, and that's what gives them telepathic communications, and that's why they're acting evil. And they need to do their OT8 to get rid of that, so that they're no longer receiving evil communications and acting all evil. And also so that they can exteriorize easy. Because part of it is enslaving all the people in the mesh universe and stuff, and so it traps them into bodies. Instead of just having a body and being able to go in and out of it and having fun, it's like you're trapped in there, you know. And by the way, I don't fully believe this whole OT8 thing anyway, in case you're wondering. I mean, I do think there is evidence for a galactic confederacy or a force of good doing an intelligence op here on Earth. And I do think there's evidence for a force of bad doing an intelligence op on this Earth. But I'm just saying I'm not fully buying this whole idea that Hubbard's expressing. It quite well could be wrong, totally. It's probably more likely wrong, to be honest. But this is at least an explanation of what Hubbard meant by his whole OT8 thing. So that's the summary of OT8. And you've got to just get rid of this communication, this implant that causes the communication. Now, what I'm going to do is I'll start reading out this student briefing doc, and I'll probably go into a part 3, so I won't go for much longer, but I'll just start reading it. Oh, and sorry, with the bloodlines thing, certain bloodlines have been affected by this implant. So that's where it can get a little bit racist. Because like I said earlier, I noticed that the Jews, there's more affected bloodlines amongst the Jews. But it's barely even racist. I'm not going to, like, you can have plenty of Jews that are good, but there does seem to be, I mean, I love Sacha Baron Cohen, but then I saw him put out propaganda and I was like, I'm just sick of it. And I visited LA where there's a large Jewish population, and I was just like, whoa. I think that they've got a higher percentage that have tapped into this Sauron force. And it was Jewish communists who set up Russia, first took over Russia. And then it was Jewish Christians who first started Christianity, and Christianity is a control system. And Jesus was a Jew, and so this lecture is almost an explanation for, because you might have heard that there are some like white supremacists who think that Jews are evil and stuff. This briefing might also be an explanation for why some people think that there's a problem with the Jews here on Earth, in case you're wondering. So that's where I was saying it might be really racist, but I'm not saying that all Jews, but that's the problem. I'm just saying that Chinese are affected, blacks are affected, white Europeans are affected, Jews are affected, but Jews are affected more. That's all I'm saying. okay, they've got more of this bloodline DNA problem. Like you look behind who did 9/11, and it appears to be like Israel and stuff. And you look at lots of people who are pushing communism in the world and stuff like that, and a lot of them are Jewish. So, yeah, it's something else. Okay, so I don't want to offend anyone, or I don't want anyone thinking that like I'm anti-Jew. I'm just pointing out that there's corrupted bloodlines here on Earth, and amongst the Jewish gene pool, there's more corrupted bloodlines than the Europeans. But the Europeans are still corrupted, and that's the problem. We've just got too much corruption going on, and that's what Hubbard's saying in this thing. He's saying it's getting worse as more and more people get affected by the lefty mind. More and more, you know what I mean? Like, it's messed up. It goes like exponentially, is what I think he's trying to say. And he's right. It is infectious. More and more people get keyed in. More and more people get keyed in. Even more, and it just happens more and more and more. Just like if you key someone out more and more and more, it gets better and better and better. So this is kind of like the ultimate conspiracy. This is the conspiracy of all conspiracies, basically. The idea that Hubbard's expressing in OT8 is the conspiracy of all conspiracies. It explains everything, right? It explains why there are certain people within the government who think it's okay to do a fake shooting so then they can take all the Americans' guns. Because that's what there are people within the government who push to do a fake shooting, to create a shooting, whatever you want to call it. They created it, and then they run all these news stories and saying, look how bad the shootings was. We've got to hand in the Americans' guns. And they've done it time and time again. They did it in Australia with Port Arthur, and we gave them all our guns. And there are scumbags within the government who are doing that. It's fucking disgusting. What sort of person would do that? What sort of person would be a leftist? Someone who's sick and mentally corrupted. So this explains that. This explains why all these things are going on. I don't really fully buy it, but at least it is a theory, and it's a good one. There's a lot of evidence supporting it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this briefing, which I'm going to read out to you, which is kind of like Hubbard's final parting words. I'm going to save it for the next briefing because it's getting late here and I don't want to continue. But yeah, I think that's about it. I think that's all I wanted to say. So yeah, that's about it. But I get what I'm trying to say is that I've studied all the information of Hubbard's and what's going on here in the world, and I actually get the idea that Hubbard's trying to express in this student briefing and in his OT8. I actually get it. And it's very Hubbard-like to come up with a conspiracy of all conspiracies. And David Icke says the same thing. Alex Jones says the same thing. It does appear that that's the case, that there are gods from somewhere else, beings from someone else, spirits from somewhere else, demons from someone else, aliens from somewhere else, whatever you want to call it, affecting people here on Earth, influencing them, and getting them to make this place a prison planet. But I'm not fully buying it anyway. But anyway, that's the theory. And it is cool, and I think it is groundbreaking. And I think you don't have to get all the way up to OT8. I mean, I want to get up to it in Scientology, and I think maybe people should try it. But you can just read this now and get this data now, because I think it's essential to know this deep information. But people might who can't, it just blow people's mind that it's just out reality. It's just like they can't see evidence for this sort of stuff, you know. But it's interesting because before COVID hit, I thought to myself, you know, why did I come to this time and space and all this sort of stuff? And the idea came into my head that all this shit, like this is just all this drama that we'd seen, right? I'm thinking around 2019, 2018, all this drama that I'd seen in the world and all this wild stuff, this is just the beginning, and actually it's what's to come that's going to be epic. And I came to this time and space for what's coming. And I thought, oh shit. I thought, oh, what? What do you mean? It gets worse? I was like, oh shit. I was like, oh no, don't tell me I came to this time and space, because what's coming in the future is going to be wild. Because I was thinking that the future was going to get better and better, and it was going to be really smooth sailing. Because I was looking at all the stuff that occurred recently. I was just like, all this crazy shit that's going on in the world, like in the 20th century stuff, all this crazy stuff. And I thought, no, you're here to see what's coming after that. Like, this is just the beginning. And then we got hit with COVID, and I was like, oh man, I was right. My suspicion was right, you know. It's actually what's coming that's freaking epic, you know. Forcing vaccines onto everyone, full-blown unveiling of the New World Order. It's all happening. It's all wild. It's full on 1984, but just like a different version. It's 1984 unveiling right now. And that's why I came to this time and space, for that, you know. And it's like, whoa. Anyway, that's just my guess. Because I thought, if I was a Satan or an alien or whatever, why would I choose to come to this time and space? You know what I mean? Like, why would I come to the year 2018 to this time and space? And now we're in 2021. I can see it's like, whoa, why did I choose Melbourne of all places? You know what I mean? To be born into one of the world's most socialist communist cities in the world. Biggest police state like in the world. There's a reason why. Probably so that I can see their game plan, how it all works, how they function, and then what they're planning to do to all the other cities in the world, you know. But yeah, this COVID thing is actually serious. We've just come out of our 4th lockdown, but they've still got heavy restrictions, so I still can't do my yoga. It's like half a lockdown basically. And how long are they going to keep it on half a lockdown for? It's freaking crazy. Melbourne was in lockdown. Melbourne's been in lockdown in total now for like 9 months in total now. There's cities in America that have done total lockdowns of worth like 6 weeks or something. Like nothing compared to this place. It's just amazing. Anyway, so it's like, why these coincidences? Anyway, I'm going off topic, but, you know, anyway, the next one's going to be really cool because I'm going to read out the briefing. I'm just going to explain it as I'm going along, because this student briefing on OT8, it's really deep information, and you first read it and you're like, whoa, I've read it so many times, and you're just like, whoa, what's he saying? Whoa, it's just such deep data, and you're just like, whoa. So I'm going to give you my interpretation next. In part 3, I'm going to give you my interpretation of what this student briefing actually means. A lot of people don't even believe this. They think this document's fake and it's just disinformation about Scientology. Oh, but also, I didn't mention the Jesus thing, yeah. So, Jesus is part of this enslavement stuff, and that Christianity is no good. Basically, that's also what Hubbard mentions in this. So this document would really offend a Christian, because they'll be like, "Whoa," and I personally do agree with him with that, because I just see lots of Christians that are not awake. But people who are rebellious and who get involved with Scientology, they seem to be more awake. And I know sometimes some people are damaged from Scientology, but I do notice that people tend to just really think outside the box, and I really think it helps bring about an awakening on earth. But I really think that Christianity, on the other hand, brings about the opposite of an awakening, which is an enslavement. I do think that's the case. There's just lots of individuals who have been exposed to Scientology in their life, and they go on to do interesting things on earth, and they help bring about an awakening. One guy is a guy called like Jim Keith, I think his name is, and he was a UFO guy, and he was involved with Scientology, and he started exposing government alien involvement and underground bases and stuff, and just shifty government stuff. And it looks like he ended up getting assassinated by the government. So he pissed them off. He wrote a book, I think, called Black Helicopters Over America or something like that. And he looked into the Men in Black. But he's just someone who's awake, who's not just, but there's not many proper Christians who are in this category. And it does seem that the spirit of Scientology, the spirit of Hubbard, is awakening and enlightenment, and the spirit of Christianity is enslavement. You got all these churches that are doing the QR codes and all this sort of stuff. Anyway. Alright, so that's it for this briefing. I've been your host, Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy. You've been listening to the Indie Scientology podcast. So remember, what you thought was impossible is possible.